In this tutorial, we'll be using vector graphics to create some iconic features. The Instagram logo is very recognizable, and an iPad again is a very recognizable piece of technology. So we will be needing to use gradients to produce these images, and we're going to do that with Adobe Illustrator to create vector graphics. We're going to start by creating a rounded rectangle, and remember that you can change how rounded the rectangle is using the arrow keys and the Alt key to make it into a rounded square. So I'm going to switch into Illustrator here. I'm going to choose my rounded rectangle tool, and as I start to drag it out, you can see that I have a rectangle. If I hold down Shift, I then have a rounded square. If I press the left arrow, it becomes a proper square. If I press the right arrow, it becomes a very rounded square. And the up and down keys can then make it more or less rounded by doing some control there. So I'm going to make it quite a rounded rectangle like so. Okay, so we have our basic shape for the outline of the logo. What we need to do now is to use the gradient tab to make a gradient that matches up more or less to the Instagram logo. The Instagram logo itself is quite a complex gradient. It's a bit of a radial gradient, so it's going out in waves here, but then it comes into a clash between the blue and the kind of purple. So we'll not get something as complex as that. We're really just going to aim for the overall color scheme, and it will be good enough for our purposes. So I'm going to come in here to the gradient tab. So this is over in these tools here. If you can't see them, you need to pop them out with a double arrow in the panels. And I'm going to choose to give it a green, yellow, orange fill. So we can see that there are various bands of color that have been added here. What we want to do is have yellow, then red, then purple. So I'm going to double click on the first green tab and change that to yellow. I can then click on this tab here and just drag it off of the bar to make it disappear. Same with the orange, grab it, drag it, disappears. From yellow, we're then going to go to red, so I'm going to double click and choose red. Then I'm going to grab and drag here, grab and drag here, and then set this final color to be a deep purple. Now, you can see that it's very red in the middle, and that's not really matching up to the Instagram logo. So we're going to tighten up that red band by using the diamonds above the gradient slider. I'm just going to pull them in a bit so that maybe the red's only taking up about 25% in the middle, approximately. In the Instagram logo, we have yellow in the corner and a red band in the middle, and then we have this kind of purpley pink happening. So we need to tilt this, and we can do that using this slider here. If you tilt this up to about 45, 46 degrees, then we have the kind of gradient that we're looking for. From here, the rest of the logo is fairly straightforward. I'm going to come back to my rounded rectangle. I want to start from the same center. So I'm going to start to drag here. I want to drag from the middle out the way, so I use the Alt key and I pull it out. And if I use Shift, I should get it to be a perfect square as well, maybe about there. And you can see it's picked the same gradient, but it's got a black outline. So I want to change the stroke to be white, and it needs to be significantly thicker. So I'm going to pick something maybe about 20 point. And that looks fine. One of the things that you might find that you should do is if you come into stroke here, we can align the stroke differently. You can see the blue outline is in the middle. We could make it that the blue outline is around the outside or around the inside. My align stroke to the middle is fine as it stands. I then need a circle, so I go to the ellipse tool. I choose the same center, so I'm going to use the Alt key to drag from the center out, and the Shift key, so Shift and Alt gives me a perfect circle, and that should also have the same thickness and gradient fill as before. So the last thing I need to do, actually I'm just going to undo that because I haven't really left a huge amount of space for the dot. So I'll try that again. I'm going to drag with the Alt and Shift keys. I'm going to leave some space. So that's looking a bit better. And then I'm going to do another circle just up in the top corner here. And again, that should be a perfect circle. So I'm going to use the Shift key to do that. It's far too thick. So I'm going to come down and give it a stroke of 1 point. And then a gradient there's no use, so I need to then also give it a fill of white. And that's us. We now have our Instagram logo. The one thing that remains to do is to highlight everything and then go to Object and Group to turn it into a single object. And I should be able, if I use the Shift key, to squash that down. Now we can see here that what's happened is the shape has become smaller, but the lines themselves haven't. And the reason for that is at some point I've changed the way my scaling is working. So if I go to Object, Transform, and Scale, you can see that Scale, Strokes, and Effects is not switched on. I'm going to switch that on and say OK. And now when I scale this down, every part of it should scale, including the size of the lines themselves. So there is my Instagram logo that I will put onto my iPad. To make the iPad is a very easy shape to make. So I'm going to start off with a rounded rectangle, and I'm going to make it roughly about iPad shaped. I need to have a very slight rounding of the corners. So just a little bit of rounding like so. I am then going to put a gradient on that. So I'm going to come back to gradient here, and I'm going to choose a different gradient. I'm going to choose, now for some reason I don't have black and white. Don't use fade to black because that's see-through. I'm going to use purple radial, which has just got 2 colours on it. And I'm going to switch from radial to linear. So radial is in a circle from the centre, linear is in a line. And I want this to stretch from white to maybe not quite black, but maybe a fairly dark grey. So somewhere about there. I also need to give it a little bit of a tilt. So I will, again, maybe give it about 40-ish degrees. And then what I'm going to do with my pointer tool, I'm going to Alt drag a copy of that. I'm going to Shift drag the corner to scale it down just a little bit. And then I'm going to place that in the top section of the iPad like so. I think it needs to be a little bit smaller. So I'm just going to drag this bottom corner up to leave space for the button, power button. That's looking a bit strange at the moment. One reason for that is that my outside of my iPad isn't outlined. So I'm going to change the stroke there to black, and that will instantly give it some definition and make it look a bit better. My screen is matching too closely to the actual outside of it, the case. So there's a clever trick here to give something a bit of a 3D look. What we do is we take the gradient and we flip it 180 degrees. So I have a reverse gradient button over here, and you can see that when I do that, it then gives a bit of a screen-based reflection. It's a nice sheen. I'm just going to take this bottom bit and move it up maybe even a little bit further to make space for the button. Button is quite straightforward. I'm going to take a circle. I'm going to come to, I'm directly below the center of the screen here, and then I'm going to Shift Alt drag a circle out. I'm going to give that a stronger gradient, so I'm going to take that one from pure black through to white, and I'm going to give it a black outline. Then, instead of me dragging a copy and making it, I'm going to use one of the menus here. I'm going to say Object, Transform, and Scale. So we've seen this before when we fixed the scaling option. And what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to make a button that is maybe 95% of the original. So if I see that, maybe 95 is not enough, maybe I'll just take it down to 90%. Okay, that looks better. So if I switch off preview, there's the original button, there's the smaller button. And the clever thing here is that I choose to copy it instead. I now have a circle within a circle, and I'm then going to do the gradient flipping thing so that it then gives us a nice 3D look to the button. So there is my iPad, nice 3D feel to the button, a little bit of a 3D feel to the screen, and I can take my Instagram icon and I can place it. Now you can see it's gone behind there, so the last thing I have to do is Object, Arrange, and Bring to Front, and I've got an iPad with a massive logo for Instagram on the screen.